Welcome to the Book of Ezra. Ezra and then Nehemiah. I believe at one time they were uh, tied together as one book. If I were going to name this book, it's called Ezra, I wouldn't call it Ezra because he hardly appears in the book. It's mainly, I would call it the return, and that is the return of the Jews to Jerusalem and how it all occurred and what happened and who came back and so forth. But before we get into all of that, we're going to go into a little history lesson here. I think it would be helpful because we starts off with Cyrus, who was the king of the Persians, as it says. Now, the different empires in the Bible, it gets kind of confusing. I'll just go through a list of them and just highlight of which ones they are, and then where we're at with this empire that in the book of Ezra. The first empire mentioned in the book of Genesis would be the Sumerian empire that was in Sumer. It was a city that was in Mesopotamia, where Nineveh and Babylon, they're all in Mesopotamia between the two rivers which run north and south, and then the southern one twists to the left, to the east, the Euphrates, and runs east and west at the curve up towards where Turkey is today. So the earliest empire in the Bible that was mentioned would be the Sumerians, or the Sumer. Then the next empire that's mentioned would be the Egyptian empire, where Jacob and the family are all taken to because Joseph was sold into Egypt, and that whole story at the end of the last 10 chapters of Genesis goes into the Egyptian empire. The next empire that's mentioned would be the Assyrian empire. Now, the Assyrian Empire basically took in the Sumerian Empire, but it was considered a lot later. Mainly, the empires, as I see it, are become an empire from three facts. One is generally a place, a capital that it starts off with. The second is a leader, and the third is the time that it appears, of course. So the Egyptian and Sumerian histories go back into the far thousands of years before Christ. And we do have hieroglyphics from Egypt, and we do have cuneiform tablets from the Sumerian Empire. But then once they get to the time of the Bible, it's the later Egyptian pharaohs that are mentioned, and Sumer, which a lot later than when it first started and first began. The Assyrians came out of Nineveh, which was one of the northernmost cities in the Mesopotamian area, and we read about them in the Bible because they come into play in the early kings. David, after David, Solomon, then come the Assyrian kings to invade the Holy Land. And we hear the names in the Bible of Tiglath-Pileser, Shalmaneser, Sargon II, that's Shalmaneser the fifth, Tiglath-Pileser the third, and Sennacherib, Esarhaddon, and Ashurbanipal. And they reigned, that empire lasted from about 900 BC to 612 BC. So 612 was 612 years before Christ, the AD. Then the Assyrians were defeated by Nebuchadnezzar, who was a Babylonian. Babylon was the southernmost city that was ruled by the Assyrians, but then the Chaldeans, which were even from further south, came up, these tribal people, and took over Babylon, and then revolted against the king of the Assyrians, and then went up and eventually defeated Nineveh, took Nineveh, and then later the battle at Carchemish was the end of the Assyrian Empire. Babylon takes reign with Nebuchadnezzar II. Nabucodonosor is his name in the Greek, but it was a short-lived empire. It's from 626 to 539, so less than 100 years. From this little small city of Babylon, which is like 3.5 miles by 2 miles, it's not a very large empire, but you'd think it was great because of all the mention of Babylon in the Bible. Then the next empire was what's lumped together called the Persian Empire, the Medo-Persian. The Medes came, they're in the northern part, and then the Persians, and they began with Cyrus the Great, who is this Cyrus right here, who defeats the Babylonians, takes over Babylon. It sets up rulers in Babylon, and we'll go into a little bit more about Cyrus in this Persian Empire here when we get into this first chapter. But it lasted from 550 to 330 BC. Then, around 330, Alexandros is his Greek name, Alexandros. And he was from Greece, of course, and he went out and conquered large parts of the Mediterranean area and towards the Indus River in India. But his own empire only lasted for about 20 years, from 332 to 312. And once Alexander was died, buried in Babylon, then his empire was busted up into the Diadochi. That's what they're called, the Diadochi, which were these generals that he had. And the main one that came out of that would have been the Vasilia ton Selevkidon, that is the kingdom of the Selevkos. And Selevkos was a man who was a general with Alexander, and he was called the Nicator, the victor, or emperor, Selevkos Nicator of the Diadochi. And it reigned from 312 BC to 63 BC. Now we're getting close to the time of Christ. Of course, then the Roman Empire came, and it started, they believe, around 100 BC, but eventually it defeated the Basilia ton Selevkidon, the Seleucid Empire, and it was ruled by the Caesars, and its main city, of course, was Rome, and it lasted from approximately 100 BC to 400 AD. So now we're going to jump back here to the fourth one before the Romans, or 3 before. There was the Seleucid, then the Macedonian with Alexander, then the Persian Empire. The Persian Empire with Cyrus. And in the first year of Cyrus, king of the Persians, to initiate the word by the mouth of Jeremiah, the Lord awakened the spirit of Cyrus, the king of the Persians. Well, exactly when this was, if it was his first year, when was he made king, or was it, it doesn't really say, but it was early on. We know that his name was Cyrus in the Greek, Cyrus, same almost in the Hebrew. And it was so this first year of Cyrus, the king of the Persians, who had defeated Babylon, to initiate the word of the Lord by the mouth of Jeremiah, who was the prophet, who we went through just in a few video seminars ago. Well, it was more than a few, 50 or 60 seminars before, the book of Jeremiah, where Jeremiah prophesies the return of the people after 70 years. So to initiate the word, the Lord awakened the Pneuma of Kiru, king of the Persians. So, and he exhorted by a report in all his kingdom, indeed in written words. So the Lord awakened the spirit of Kiru. It's interesting because without the awakening of the Lord, he would just be the same and could have been a cruel ruler and who knows what. But his spirit was awakened. He was considered to be a benevolent ruler in history, and he cared for human rights, and he wasn't cruel. He had a wife, Kasandani, and she was an Achaemenid's noblewoman, and they had 4 or 5 children, and he supposedly loved her greatly. And so sounds like a wonderful emperor. He only lasted for 30 years with his empire, but of course the empire continued after him. But so he, being a benevolent person, he was used by God. God awakened the spirit of Kyros, and it's a wonderful thing to have the Spirit of God working in you. He was called the Christos, I believe, someplace in the Bible. Maybe it was in Jeremiah, the Christos, and the only non-Jew that's called the Christos, the Anointed, or the Christ. So Cyrus was a man who first came into existence, and he conquered the Medes, which were in northern Iran today, and then up into Turkey, the Lydian empires, and over into Kazakhstan and those Istans in the steppes. Then he came down and developed his empire in Persia, and his capital is called Pasargadae, and it's in the central part of Iran today. And the city is in ruins. It's just dirt, rocks, and different columns and things, just almost the same as Babylon. But there is one building that sits up still there, and that's the tomb of Cyrus. And apparently he was killed in Kazakhstan, but they took his body back to Pasargadae and put him in this tomb. And then by the time Alexander came and defeated the Persians, he went and visited the tomb of Cyrus in Pasargadae, and he venerated it. He thought highly of Cyrus, and it said he visited twice by Strabo and Strabo's geography. So this Persian Empire, as Cyrus built it up, became the greatest empire at that time. It was greater than any of the empires before. So the report, what did it say? Thus said Kyros o Vasilev's person, Cyrus, the king of the Persians, all the Vasilias, the kingdoms, the basil plant, basilica, all those words with a basil come from this. A king is Vasilias kingdoms of the earth, Kyrios, the Lord, God of heaven, gave to me. And he looked upon me to build to him a house in Jerusalem in Judea. An interesting little thing that's happened here is that we're in 2018, October, and a few months back, President Trump of the United States moved the embassy from the United States from Tel Aviv into Jerusalem. And when he did that, the Jews, some of them in there, I don't know who did it, but they made a coin. What do they call it? Coin to coin? Forged a coin, whatever. And the coin had 2 pictures of people, and the one in the background was Cyrus, and the one in front was President Trump. And so Trump moved the American embassy to Jerusalem. It was a big deal. So Cyrus has now moved telling the people to go back to Jerusalem and to build the house. That's the temple. And he says, who is there among you from all his people, and his God will be with him. So then let him ascend unto Jerusalem in Judea, and let him build the house of God. That doesn't mention Ezra here. It just, this is all about Cyrus. Let him build the house of the God of Israel. He is God, the one in Jerusalem. Oh, that the rulers of the world today could see that God of the Jews is God, and he is God of the world, God of us all. But Jerusalem is special to him. It still is. But when the new temple of Ezekiel is built, it won't be in Jerusalem. It will be on the city on a high mountain to the west of the Sea of Galilee, which a river flows from the throne out into the Sea of Galilee. But at this time, Jerusalem is the center, and so Cyrus is put on his heart, so go back and build up this temple. All the Jews being left from all the places of which he sojourned there, of which basically the captives were taken, the men of his place shall take up of his in silver and gold and in belongings and in cattle and the voluntary offering for the house of God in Jerusalem. So take a collection of gold and silver of all the places. So these people must have had some money in the 70 years that they were in that area in Babylon. And Cyrus is telling them to gather together the people in the areas. And topos, we have a topography, is a study of places and maps. And rose up rulers of the families of Judah and Benjamin, and the priests. I'm going to strike that out of the rulers. Doesn't need to be in there. There it goes. And Benjamin and rose up rulers of the families of Judah and Benjamin, and the priests and the Levites, all which God awakened their spirit to ascend to build the house of the Lord in Jerusalem. Now, it's interesting there that it says that from Judah, the families of Judah and Benjamin. Now, to me, we learn about the tribes of Israel in the Book of Revelation, 144,000, 12 from each tribe. But I mean, I have a hard time understanding how anybody would know what tribe they're from. Basically, all the 10 tribes from the north were taken by Shalmaneser, the Assyrian. It was left was Judah and Benjamin, and the priesthood of the temple area, and the Levites that were there. So they were going to rebuild, but that doesn't have anything about all these 12 tribes. So I don't know how they come up with these 12 tribes, how people are going to know where they're from. And all the ones round about them strengthened in their hands in items of silver, in gold, and in belongings, and in cattle, and in gifts, besides the ones in voluntary offerings. So now they've collected all this money. And Vasilev's Cyrus brought forth the items of the house of the Lord, which Nabucodonosor, I was telling you earlier, it's really in the Greek, it's Nabucodonosor, Nebuchadnezzar, took from Jerusalem and had put them in the house of his God. Can't think of who the God of the Nebuchadnezzar was, but so these some of these articles that were still left that they could gather up from the original temple were sought out and found. And Cyrus Kyros, the Vasilev's person, brought them out by the hand of Mithridatu, the Gazvarinu, the treasurer. Now this is a Persian word. It's not Greek. It's not Hebrew. And so this man Mithradatu. He was the treasurer, brought all these items out and counted them out to Sasarvasar, the ruler of Judah. Now, Sasarvasar sounds like it's another Persian name. Many people think that's the same as Zorobabel, which was the ruler, the Hebrew name for where it's mentioned the ruler of these people that came back from Babylon, because later here it says they came from Babylon. So that's a very good possibility, because they are both mentioned as rulers, and you don't hear too much about the Sasavasar anymore. Mainly it's with Zorobabel. And this is their number, arithmos. Arithmetic comes from that word. Wine coolers of gold, 30. Chrysii, we have a chrysanthemum, comes from that. Chrys is gold. And wine coolers of argyri. Argyri, we have Argentina, comes from that, the silver country. Helii, Chilia is 1,000. 1,000 knives for altering, 9. And 29 and 20, 29. And basins of gold, 30. And double items made of silver, 410. And other items, 1,000. All the items of gold and of silver, 5,400. That's quite a few items. The whole amount Sasavasar led up with the resettlement ascending from out of Babylon into Jerusalem. So here we see all these people given the go-ahead to leave, to go back to Jerusalem, build the temple. They're given money and support by Cyrus, and they leave from Babylon in the southern part of the Mesopotamian area, which had just been taken over by Cyrus. And they leave with these 5,000 items of gold and silver, so quite a bit of worth. And we'll continue the next chapter, 2. The captivity returns to Jerusalem and goes into the people, basically. We'll probably go through that fairly quickly because it's just names. There are some highlighted names that are important, so we don't want to skip it because Jesus is mentioned. Now, Jesus, right down here. Yeshua, well, you can't see it, it's covered me up. There it is. Jesus, that's Jesus in the Greek, in the King James, and the same as Joshua. For some reason, the King James people decided to split them all up. Make Jesus Joshua when it was back in the book of Joshua, even though it said Jesus. And then we have Jesus here in Ezra, Nehemiah. And then we have Jesus called Jesus in the New Testament. We'll go through all these, this return of these people in chapter 2, our next video seminar, Book of Ezra. Hope you'll join us. God bless.